Hello everyone, welcome to Inconvenient Truths. I'm your host, Jennifer Zheng. Recently, one article and one meeting in China have caused a lot of public attention and discussion as to where China is heading. More and more signs are giving us very clear indications that Xi Jinping is preparing to proactively decouple with the West, form an alliance with Russia, and take China back to the Cultural Revolution, or turn China into another North Korea. What is this article and the meeting all about? Today, let's talk about this. Before we move on, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel or are still subscribed. Please also like and share my videos and channel to give me a boost, or go to my website at jenniferzengblog.com to sign up for a membership or make a donation. Now, let's talk about the one article first. At the end of August, the Chinese Academy of History published an article titled "A New Exploration into the Problem of Seclusion and the Sealing of the Country in the Ming and Qing dynasties." The main points of these articles are: it is not that appropriate to refer to policies in China's Ming and Qing dynasty as seclusion and the sealing of the country. This term was imposed by Western countries on China, and it was a cultural product of Eurocentric influence of a particular era. It was not right to draw the conclusion that the Ming and Qing dynasties' policies of seclusion and sealing of the country had led to China's backwardness. On the contrary, the policies of Ming and Qing dynasties should not be called seclusion and sealing of the country. Instead, they should be called 自主宪官, which means autonomously restricting foreign trade or communications with the West. In other words, limiting trade or restriction on customs was an autonomous act. It was imposed to safeguard the territorial and cultural security of China, and was a defensive self-protection strategy in the face of foreign attacks, especially in the face of the threat of Western colonial aggression. So from today's point of view, how and to what extent to open up a country is a matter of national sovereignty. And it is wrong to just view seclusion and sealing of the country as backward, barbaric, or to regard it as a violation of international law, etc. So in conclusion, this article completely overturned the previously commonly accepted view that seclusion and the sealing of the country is a bad thing. It has given the policy of seclusion and the sealing of the country a new name and claims it to be a good thing. So many Chinese people were very shocked by this totally contrary article and started to discuss why such an article was published at such a time. Well, they soon figured out that this must be to prepare the Chinese public for the upcoming seclusion and sealing of the country that Xi Jinping is going to adopt in China. You know, there's a term in the CCP's China called 舆论先行, which means that before the CCP is going to do something, it will create a narrative first to either brainwash, convince, or warn the public. One simple article sometimes is followed by a very huge political movement or campaign, which may result in the deaths of millions. For example, on November 10, 1965, a newspaper in Shanghai called Wenhui Bao published an article called Review of the New Historic Drama Hai Rui's Removal. The author of this article was Yao Wenyuan, who became a member of the famous Fall of Gan later. Mao Zedong's wife Jiang Qing was the head of the Gang of Four, which controlled the power organs of the CCP through the later stages of the Cultural Revolution. Anyway, after Yao Wenyuan's article review of the new historic drama Hai Rui's removal was published on Wenhui on November 10, 1965, it was recarried by the CCP's most important mouthpiece, the People's Daily, on November 30th, and was printed and distributed as a single volume later. And this article actually triggered the 10-year non-cultural revolution in China that caused the deaths of 7 to 20 million Chinese people. So that's why so many Chinese people became very uneasy when they saw that an article saying cutting China off from the world was a good thing was published by an official organization. It could well indicate the next big move of the CCP. Then, 3 days ago, that's on September 6, Xi Jinping hosted a meeting of the so-called Central Committee for Comprehensively Deepening Reform. Only hours later, Xinhua's report about this meeting was everywhere in China. People immediately noticed two facts. One, the report was published only 4 to 5 hours after the meeting. It shows that getting this report published as soon as possible was set up as a priority, as usually more time is needed for this kind of important report to be checked and approved. It also shows that the CCP wants its officials and the general public to know that things discussed in the meeting are super important. The second fact that people noticed was that the word reform was mentioned 10 times in the Xinhua report, and the opening up to the outside world was mentioned 0 times. No mention at all. You know, since Deng Xiaoping set reform and opening up as the new direction to go for China in 1978, reform and opening up have always been mentioned together for more than 40 years. And in that period of time, almost every Chinese person believed that reform and opening up was good and have brought prosperity to China, and China should always stick to reform and opening up. But now, opening up suddenly disappeared, and only reform was left there. What does this mean? Also, in this meeting hosted by Xi Jinping on September 6, several issues were discussed, and the number one was how to adopt a so-called new whole national system to overcome key core technology difficulties. When the CCP talks of the whole national system, it means pulling together all the country's strength and resources to do something to ensure its success, or concentrating nationwide effort and resources on key national undertakings. We can say that the CCP is very obsessed with its whole national system, and it did have some success before. For example, it successfully made its own atomic bombs and produced many Olympic gold medalists. But those two areas may be the only ones that the CCP's whole national system has been successful. In many other areas, it has been a disaster. An old example was the so-called Great National Steel-Making Movement in 1958. During that movement, even farmers were involved in making steel, and people were not even allowed to cook at their homes, as their iron cooking pots were required to be sent to factories to make steel. And this great national steelmaking movement led to the Great Chinese Famine that saw 40 million Chinese people die of hunger. The new example was Xi Jinping's trillion yuan investment in the chip industry. A while ago, I did a show to talk about that. Xi Jinping's big money spinning campaign in the chip industry has become a rotten tail project too. But in the latest meeting on September 6, Xi Jinping again emphasized that all the resources in the country should be pooled to optimize the allocation of innovative resources, strengthen the national strategic, scientific, and technological forces, significantly improve the systematic capacity of scientific and technological research in a number of important areas to form a competitive advantage and win the strategic initiative. We all know that recently the US has put more and more restrictions on exporting chips or chip-related technology to the CCP. So the CCP calls these stranglehold technologies. Someone has listed 35 so-called stranglehold technologies that China still has to make breakthroughs. Lithography machines, chips, and operating systems are the top 3 stranglehold technologies on this list. Obviously, despite the fact that the trillion yuan investment in the chip industry has become a rotten tail project, Xi Jinping has decided that more money should be invested to develop those stranglehold technologies so that Western countries will no longer be able to contain China. In the past 2 decades or so, the CCP has established an almighty powerful digital surveillance and control system in China and virtually everywhere, including the high-ranking CCP officials in China are under strict surveillance and control. The CCP relies heavily on this system to maintain its rule. But big data, AI, cloud computing, etc., all need powerful chips to maintain their operation. So I think now the CCP is panicking about the West cutting off its technology. That's why Xi Jinping urgently held this meeting to double down his bet. So, judging from all aspects of what is happening in China now, we can draw this conclusion. Xi Jinping has made the basic judgment that the international situation will become more and more hostile for the CCP, and China's economy is also rapidly deteriorating. And under this kind of circumstance, the only way to protect the CCP and himself is to close down the country, actively decouple from the West, and cut off Chinese people's connections with the outside world. Recently, it was reported that Xi Jinping will meet Russian President Putin at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit next week. This will be the first time that Xi has left China in over 2 years. Why is Xi willing to leave China before the most crucial 20th National Congress of the CCP? People talk about how dangerous it is for Xi to leave China now at such a sensitive time. His political enemies could stage a coup when he's not in China. Why does he dare to leave? This could either mean that Xi is confident that no one is able to stage a coup, or that Xi's need to meet Putin is too great for him not to go despite the risks. Why does Xi need to meet Putin in person? If Xi has decided to cut ties with the West, he would like very much to form an internal circulation or an alliance with Russia to fight against the West. Recently, it was also reported that Russia is buying weapons, millions of artillery shells and rockets from North Korea, and could be forced to buy more in the future. Is Russia really buying from North Korea? From previous Western military research, we know that North Korea has only a maximum of 200 mobile ballistic missiles, with fewer than 150 remaining in operational status over the long term due to fuel fail and technical maintenance issues. Since North Korea missiles are tied to its claimed nuclear strike capability, reducing its missile stockpile would mean a reduction in North Korea's nuclear deterrent. So is Kim Jong-un willing to sell such missiles? I seriously doubt it. I also suspect that the CCP is the real seller in this arms deal. After receiving the orders from Russia, North Korea transfers them to West Korea, which is a nickname for China. Recently, the CCP's National Primary and Secondary School Textbook Review Committee has just approved the Russian language textbook for compulsory education's curriculum for fourth grade students in China. And the 2022 version of the compulsory Russian curriculum has also been developed and issued by the CCP's Ministry of Education. So, looking forward, Xi Jinping's next move could be proactively cutting ties with the West, forming closer cooperation with Russia, and becoming more and more like North Korea. So, whether you are Chinese or a foreigner in China, the time window for you to run out of China with all your wealth intact might be very short. Recently, more and more Chinese people are complaining that they cannot withdraw cash from ATM machines of even very big banks. So, how serious are the problems? And how much foreign reserve does the CCP still have? Maybe it will be too late when we find out the true answers. Well, that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. And I hope that you will click on the link in the description box to subscribe to Shenyun Creations to enjoy all the wonderful performance as well as the 10% discount.